They arrived back in Melbourne today, vowing to continue their campaign against China's human rights record, despite fearing for their lives.
There were 10 of us from Australia that went to China. What our plan was to just be normal tourists, go to the Great Wall, that sort of thing. And on the very last day, we would go to Tiananmen Square to make a protest.
Tiananmen Square is a place where people go to appeal to the government and to the heavens. Tiananmen translation is Heaven's Gate. In the past, that's where everyone went if they had a problem, but they're not allowed to be heard in their country.
The first my family or anyone knew about it was when they saw the headlines on television. Olympian arrested in China.
Just being asked to take my clothes off when I know.
They dragged me from my shoulder and my hip, and I was dragged across all the concrete.
And I was running with my banner. And then a burly policeman grabs it off me, and
two of them tried to drag me or pick me up, and then I'm thinking heavy thoughts. And no one could pick me up.
I didn't fight back. I couldn't see the point. I'd been arrested. I had to go and do what I could do and get the news out there without making a real general nuisance of myself.
Nothing in our media was reporting about the persecution at all.
We needed to be on TV, we needed to be in the newspapers for all of Australia to go, oh, look what's happening in China, how can they do that? What's this Dafa? They needed to know.
We weren't there to cause trouble, we were there to let them know that we were going to support them. We wanted to support them in their difficult times.
We knew that it was quite possible we were going to die. It could have been an international incident, could have been chucked in a cell and never seen again.
And you can't let a government turn around and do whatever they want. Human life is sacred. Dafa for me, it's a cultivation practice of mind, body and heart. It's living by truthfulness, compassion and forbearance.
There are 4 standing exercises which open the energy channels, and then there's a sitting meditation.
Dafa grew so fast, and within 7 years there's over 100 million people practicing in China. They would get 10,000 people in a park, just one park. Everyone loved it. A lot of the top communist leaders were practicing.
I started practicing Dafa when I was 18. We found it at a Mind, Body, Spirit festival. We sort of lived a spiritual life before that, and when we found this, it seemed to answer all of our questions.
And when I started practicing in February 1999, everyone was just doing their exercise, going to the park, everything was beautiful. We'd do exercises, meet and have a coffee afterwards and come back the next week. This went along well until July 1999, when the persecution started.
China at this time is run by the Communist Party, and the Communist Party needs to have control over all their people. They have to put up their fist and they have to swear their allegiance and their life to the Communist Party. One man only said, there's too many, let's get rid of them.
It was actually the president alone. More people were learning this than people in his own party. So his jealousy was fueled this rage to go against Dafa.
He just said, no one is allowed to practice Dafa anymore. Communism is atheists. They don't believe in God or any belief whatsoever. So it's not just Dafa they persecute, it's any religion over there at all.
How could people do this to each other? And I thought, no, this can't be right.
It made no sense to me. I'm like, why would anybody persecute, these peaceful people? 2001, Mum and I went to Hong Kong, talked to people while I was there, and then I found out, oh, my sister's been taken, she's been in an institution now, whether it's a mental hospital or slave labour or, forced labour camp.
And this went on for a couple of years and it just got worse and worse. People were coming out of China and saying what was happening.
都受了非人的待遇，包括不准互相说话，包括包夹，包括不允许正常的机械，包括高强度的劳力，包括50多岁的老人在每天坐在小板凳上，手在不停地干活，不管身体状况如何，这些都是非人的待遇。整个对法轮功制，这些做好人、修真善人是没有，这些善良的人却没有一滴点良知，很残酷的折磨、伤害。所以，我现在在这里，我希望我们获得自由，我希望将人民一手牵引的这场对法轮功的镇压，能够得到全世界善良人们的重视。
People have to stand up and say, we're not putting up with this. We're not going to let a country do whatever they want to do. It's not right.
We just wanted to go there and make the effort to stop them from doing it. In Melbourne particularly and Sydney, there was no media coverage at all. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to go to China, was to make sure people knew about it here.
And they asked me if I would go, and I'd seen it. I'd actually seen it beforehand of me with an Olympic flag and running into Tiananmen Square. And that was probably a year before I left, right, to go. I'd seen this vision. They also asked me if I would meet a reporter over there.
We were from Melbourne, Sydney and Tasmania. The 10 of us took different flights. We stayed in different hotels.
We were followed everywhere. We went on this tour that was arranged by the hotel, and the lady was very nice, and she sort of said a few funny things along the way, like, be careful.
Then we went down to Tiananmen Square to check that out. Oh, this is interesting. They had people with rifles every 3 metres or so, and we thought, we're going to run between these guys and do our protest. This is going to be interesting. And then we also could see that people were following us back to the hotel.
We just sort of had a laugh at it, but when we're like, when it comes to the day when we leave our hotel, we're going to have a plan on how are we going to get here without anyone noticing.
The morning of the protest, we packed our bag, a little backpack, with what we wanted to take with us. Like I wanted my passport. I actually bought 2 things on the wall, but I wanted a little teapot and a few things, so I put them in. Then I had to go to the hotel. Kerry O'Brien was the name of the person, but I didn't know what he looked like or who he was. And we had a code that he was going to say a certain thing and I would answer yes. And I noticed on the way in there were these 4 very unlikely hotel guests sitting outside that area, right? So I knew they weren't. I thought, okay, these are the 4 that are going to think they're going to spring and find out where I am. He met me. He said, what's the weather like in Australia? I said, oh, great. So a very simple thing. So up we went. He interviewed me. I told him what time we were doing it. He asked me about being an Olympic swimmer and what I'd done and blah, 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 all that. Then he said, you realise you'll be followed? I said, yeah, I know that. He said, you'll be okay. I know you'll be okay. Anyway, then I went out. Sure enough, as I went past, they stood up and they started following me. So I raced around the corner, down the escalator that wasn't working, around the corner to the lift, up to the 8th floor, ran across, got in the lift and went down to the lobby and got out there and got straight into a taxi. So I avoided them totally. And we had to meet the others there at 10 o'clock. We were going to protest.
So we got there, we're walking towards the gates.
4 of us were a little bit late.
I could see 4 people with banners out. They opened like right on time, saying Falun Dafa How, Falun Dafa How, Falun Dafa is good, truthfulness, compassion, forbearance is good, this sort of thing. Jan and everyone's like, quick, go, go. So we're like running towards the gate.
Jan ran in and she was lucky enough to be able to be there on time to be with them, to be able to show their banners to say that Falun Dafa is good, to make a protest.
I can remember myself going, oh my God, they've started. And I was running, exactly what I'd seen. I ran in to the thing, Falun Dafa How, with my banner, you know, Falun Dafa How. And then burly policeman grabs it off me and Yeah, and I still kept saying, Falun Dafa how, and
they were just so shocked and like crazed the way they were acting with the military that they didn't even notice that we could possibly be a part of it. So we all got ushered back, and Jan just bolted and went, "That's it," kind of thing. And she ran towards them and jumps and says, "You stop what you're doing," because they were really trying to hurt him. When Jan talks and in that tone, everyone steps back.
We watched them being taken away and dragged away and put onto a bus. And we went right into the centre of Tiananmen Square. Stuart and I had yellow T-shirts on with Falun Dafa written on it in Chinese and in English. So we took our coats off and showed the Falun Dafa T-shirts. We sat down, we crossed our leg and we put one hand up.
Tourists are everywhere. Mum's sitting there next to me and we're yelling Falun Dafa how.
The 5 minutes that we were there seemed such a long time. And in this time there would have been at least 50 to 100 people gathered around. By then a bus came, police came out, and I was the first one taken. They dragged me from my shoulder, my clothes from my shoulder and my hip, and I was dragged across the Tiananmen Square, all the concrete and everything dragged.
Then he took me over to where the van was and he put us there. And I thought, we could have just walked off. I didn't want to. I felt I had a responsibility for everybody else to make sure the rest were all okay, because there were still 3 that hadn't turned up, and they were the ones that went over the other side.
So I'm just sitting there trying to be clear and focused on what I'm doing, and pretty soon a police officer or army, whatever, comes stood next to me, this young guy, and he was all frazzled. He's like, "Oh, what do I do? I've got to look like I'm doing my job and I know what I'm doing." I could feel that that's what he was sort of going on about. You know, Mum got dragged off. She was put on the bus and just pushed to the back. Marilyn had the banner taken off her and then she kind of wandered off. Marilyn
is still walking around telling all these people. Her voice was so quiet and gentle.
They didn't know if they should, you know, grab her or hurt her or drag her. They just sort of escorted her. She just kept talking to them along the way.
She said I had to be like that because even if they didn't speak English, they knew what we were saying was from the heart and was from kindness.
3 of them tried to pick me up and they couldn't pick me up. I'm just thinking heavy thoughts. I'm like, "Nah, you're not picking me up." And then about 4 to 5 guys were grabbing me, dragging me.
They couldn't pick him up. He was still in full lotus. So they had 2 policemen on both sides picked him up by his arms, and they carried him in full lotus all the way to the bus. And the whole time he was yelling at Falun Dafa how, Falun Dafa how, and people just stood and watched the whole time. They were absolutely amazed.
We get loaded into this truck.
We're all separated. I had 3 police officers in the room with me, and they questioned us, they screamed at us, right in our face, spitting, and it was, yeah.
I had 5 police interviewing me for 5.5 hours, actually. "Why did you come here to our country? Why cause trouble?" I said, "No, I came to let the world know what was happening, what the Chinese government is doing to your people, because they want to practice meditation, exercises, truth, compassion and tolerance. People here, all they did was practice Falun Dafa. Our social economy was brought into unrest." I said, "Well, that's not right. This is just from my understanding. We're meant to work, we're meant to run a normal life, we're meant to be tested in society, we're meant to do that, we're meant to study. And we're supposed to be contributing to society, not causing unrest." She wrote all this down and she wanted me to sign it, and I said, "No." She said, "But I'll put it into English." She'd done a degree in English and she was a policeman. I said, "Look, you really need to get out and see the world. It's not really like this."
They don't believe Westerners practice this. This is Chinese. Stuart and I went particularly because one of the things we wanted to do was to tell the Chinese people that it's practiced all over the world. The main thing we had to do was when we got back to Melbourne, we had media, we had all the TV stations there waiting for us. They needed to know. We needed to be on TV, we needed to be in the newspapers for all of Australia to go, "Oh, look what's happening in China. How can they do that? What's this Falun Dafa?" They needed to know. When we got off the plane, a lot of practitioners and all the TV stations and also newspapers were waiting for us. They took photos, they listened to our stories. Everyone got a turn to talk about what they had been through in China. One of the girls had her finger broken. The men were badly beaten, and they talked about that as well. We didn't know whether China would keep us over there, whether we would be imprisoned. So it was very serious, and what we were doing we knew was very serious. But sometimes you have to take drastic measures for people to stand up and listen.
After hearing about all these personal stories from people who had been persecuted to death, one of them said, my daughter was killed, or, I was put in jail for, months, years. I don't know how anyone doesn't respond the way we did. And everyone's looking at us like, why would you do that? It's nothing to do with you. Everything is. All these products that you see in the shops, they're all made by these slaves. I've known people get out of these slave labour camps and they say, I made that product, I made that product. All these Simpsons figurines, the slippers, all these different things in all of our shops, they're all made by them.
I know I've done a lot of interviews, a lot of talking about this since then. Speeches that I did in City Square. Even when we did the Human Rights Torch Relay, went round to 69 towns in Victoria. So there's lots of things we've done since, and I'm happy to talk about Tiananmen Square anytime because it was such a proud thing for me to do, proud to be able to try and help those people, hoping that they would get something from it.
So when there's no more communism in China and it's just a normal government being run, Dafa will be legal and everyone will be allowed to practice, and I will go back to China.
It was like something that you wait a lifetime for something like that to happen, and you can't really explain sort of what it was like, because it's one of those things that changes you. It really just changed us.
I would have thought, honestly, it would have ended by now. I would have thought the Chinese people would have stood up and told their government that enough is enough and stop. It wouldn't happen here. China has gotten into every country in the world just about. They've pulled the wool over everybody's eyes. They haven't over mine or a lot of the practitioners, and I will keep standing up to them till it does finish. Yeah, all right?